When courtesy turns to courtship. A Hood Eloquence presentation. Where the streets meet the literature. There is a hunger that has nothing to do with the stomach. It lives behind the ribs. It breathes. It waits. And when the right person walks through the door, it does not ask permission to be fed. Hood Eloquence. Part 1. The space between hello and everything. Chapter 1. The door she built. Rachel Hendrix had learned to love things that couldn't leave her without a fight. Buildings were good that way. Coffee was good that way. The particular satisfaction of watching a stranger walk into a space you'd imagine from nothing, that was the best kind of love. Reliable. Earned. Hers. She stood behind the bar at Grounds, the coffee shop she'd carved out of the southwest corner of the Parlor, her shared office space on the third floor of a converted textile building in Midtown, and watched the morning find its rhythm the way it always did. Steam from the espresso machine. The soft percussion of laptops being opened. The smell of dark roast cutting through the particular stillness of people trying to begin. "You're doing it again," said Maya from across the bar, not looking up from her latte art. "Doing what?" "That thing where you look at the whole room like it's a child you made." Rachel smiled. "It is a child I made." Maya, her barista, her best friend since Spellman, her keeper of secrets and schedules, said a cortado on the pass and looked at her directly. "You have 5 check-ins today. One of them is a week long. Corporate account. Digital something. He's new to town." He, Maya confirmed. "And before you give me that face, I'm telling you as a professional. As your employee. As someone who has absolutely no personal stake in whether or not you." Maya. "He's fine, Rachel." Rachel took the cortado and drank it herself. "Set up the second-floor suite. Make sure the window unit isn't making that noise." She walked the floor the way she always did before 9, touching things, straightening things, needing the space to know her hands had been there. The parlor was her vision made physical. Exposed brick softened by warm Edison light, 32 private desks, 6 collaborative tables, 2 full conference rooms, a podcast studio on the 4th floor, and Grounds at the center of it all, keeping everyone fed and wired and human. She had opened it 2 years ago, 11 months after the divorce was finalized, 14 months after she'd moved out of the house on Birchwood that David had made feel like a verdict. She didn't think about David on mornings like this. She had trained herself not to. It was the same discipline she brought to everything, the same muscle she'd built making espresso at 5 a.m. when she was 22, and nobody believed she could run a room, let alone own a building. She was 34 now. She owned a building. She was fine. The elevator opened at 9:03 and William Dean walked in. Rachel was not watching the elevator. She was reviewing invoices at the end of the bar. She was absolutely not watching the elevator. And yet something made her look up, some shift in the air, some frequency of arrival that felt different from the usual Monday morning drift of regulars and remote workers. He was tall. Not performatively tall, just built like a man who had grown into his own dimensions without apology. Dark skin, deep brown, the kind that held light rather than just reflecting it. He wore a slim charcoal button-down with the sleeves rolled to the forearm, dark trousers, and shoes that said he cared about the details without needing anyone to notice. He had a leather messenger bag over one shoulder, and he was looking at the space the way people looked at things when they were genuinely pleased. Not impressed. Pleased. There was a difference. Impressed was performance. Pleased was real. He walked to the welcome desk. Maya was already there, which meant Maya had already noticed him, which meant Rachel was going to hear about this for the rest of the day. "William Dean," he said. His voice was low and clear, the kind of voice that didn't need extra volume because it had enough weight to carry itself. "Welcome to the parlor, Mr. Dean. I'm Maya. We have your suite on the 2nd floor already." A pause. "Can I get you anything from Grounds before I show you up? Our owner makes the best cortado in the city." Rachel looked down at her invoices. "That sounds perfect," William said. When she looked up again, he was looking at her. Not because she'd moved or made a sound. He was simply looking at her the way people sometimes looked at things that interested them. Direct. Unhurried. Like he had all the time in the world to decide what he thought. She held it for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to be honest, short enough to be graceful, and then went back to her invoices. Maya appeared at her elbow 30 seconds later, whispering, 2 seconds. That was 2 full seconds, Rachel Hendrix. "Cortado," Rachel said. "Go." She brought it herself. She couldn't explain it. She had a business to run, invoices to review, a plumber coming at 11. She was not the kind of woman who brought coffee to the new guest. She employed people for that. But she was already walking, and the cortado was already in her hand, and she was apparently the kind of woman who brought coffee to the new guest now. He was setting up his station at the window desk when she knocked at the open suite door, one of the parlor's best rooms, with floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the city's rooftops and a walnut desk that she'd found at an estate sale in Savannah. He turned. Up close, he was more. The jaw was stronger, The eyes were darker, and there were faint lines at the corners that spoke of a man who had laughed and squinted into sunlight and lived in his face rather than just wearing it. From grounds, she said. I'm Rachel Hendrix. I own the space. He took the cortado with both hands, like it was something worth receiving, and tasted it before he said anything else. The silence while he drank was not uncomfortable. It was the opposite of uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that knew what it was doing. That's remarkable, he said simply. Thank you. She put her hands in her pockets, which was something she only did when she was trying to look casual and not quite succeeding. You're new to the city? 3 weeks. I've been working from the hotel, but I have client meetings coming this week, and I needed something that felt like, he gestured at the room. At the light coming through the window. At the particular quality of the parlor's air. Like this. Like what? He considered the question seriously. Like somewhere a person of substance would work. She felt the compliment land somewhere below her sternum. What kind of work? Digital consulting. I help mid-sized companies build infrastructure for remote teams. Workflow systems, culture architecture, that kind of thing. A pause. I move a lot. This is the longest I've stayed in one city in 3 years. What keeps you in one place? The question was professional. She meant it professionally. He looked at her with the same unhurried quality he'd brought to the room, and something in the look made the question feel larger than she'd intended. I'm still finding out, he said. She nodded. Took a breath. Said, well, the parlor has everything you need. Maya can walk you through the amenities. My door is always open if you have questions about the space. She turned to leave. MS, Hendrix. She looked back. Thank you. For the cortado. For bringing it yourself. She hadn't thought he would notice that part. Most people didn't notice the texture of a gesture, just the gesture itself. Of course, she said. And went back to her invoices. And did not think about the eyes. Or the both hands way he'd received the coffee. Or the voice. She thought about all of it. Chapter 2. The Architecture of Attention. William Dean had a system. He'd built it over years of working from borrowed spaces, cafes and co-working spots and hotel lobbies across 6 countries and 11 cities. He arrived early. He claimed a window. He put on his headphones. He worked. He did not entangle himself in the texture of whatever community had temporarily adopted him, because communities required tending, and tending required time, and time was the one resource he'd never had enough of. That had been the problem with Lena, ultimately. Not that he didn't love her. He had. 8 years was not nothing. 8 years was a whole architecture of shared meals and comfortable silences, and learning which arguments were worth having and which were just weather. He had loved Lena Zimmerman with consistency and care and the particular loyalty of a man who believed in what he'd chosen. But Lena wanted lightness. She wanted possibility, the feeling that life was still open, that roots were optional, that the next city could always be the better one. And William had finally, at 36, begun to want the opposite. He wanted a place that knew his name. A table where he sat every Sunday. A child who would grow up knowing where they were from. He had said these things to Lena with love, and she had heard them with fear, and they had both understood, without cruelty, that they had grown into different shapes. He was fine. He was genuinely fine. He had done the work, therapy, long walks, the solitary discipline of a man relearning his own company. He had arrived in this city 3 weeks ago feeling something he hadn't felt in longer than he could name, open. His system, however, had not anticipated Rachel Hendrix. She was everywhere, and she was nowhere invasive. That was the thing. She ran the space with a quiet authority that wasn't performative. She simply moved through the parlor like a woman who knew every board of it, every wire, every decision that had led to every chair being exactly where it was. He would see her in the morning opening the shop, in the afternoon walking the floor, in the early evening hunched over something at the bar that clearly needed her full attention. She never came to his suite again. She'd made that clear in a way that had nothing to do with coldness. It was more like she understood where lines were, and she drew her own around herself as a matter of course, not defense. She smiled when they passed in the hall. She asked once, genuinely, if the window unit was behaving. She sent Maya up with an afternoon pour-over on Wednesday with a note that said simply, "You looked like you needed this." He had been on a call with a client in Copenhagen when the pour-over arrived. He'd picked up the note and read it 3 times. You looked like you needed this. He had needed it. Not just the coffee. Something about being seen across the distance of a room, seen accurately, seen without being asked, had loosened something in his chest that he hadn't realized was tight. On Thursday, he went down to grounds at 8, before the morning rush. She was there. Apron tied. Hair up. Reading something on her phone with the focused expression of someone trying to decode information, not simply consume it. The note, he said, sitting at the bar. She looked up. The note? The one with the pour-over. You said I looked like I needed it. How did you know? She set the phone down and considered him the way she considered everything, directly, without performance. You'd been in the same position for 6 hours. You hadn't moved to get water. Your shoulders were doing this. She demonstrated, a subtle rounding forward. And you'd looked at the window twice in 30 minutes like you were trying to remember what outside looked like. He stared at her. You were watching me? I watch everything in my space. It's not personal. It felt personal. The words came out before he decided to say them. He watched her process them, the slight shift of her expression, something moving behind her eyes that she chose not to name. What would you like this morning, she said. He smiled. He couldn't help it. Surprise me. She made him something she called a harvest latte, espresso and oat milk and a particular balance of spices she declined to specify. She set it in front of him and watched him taste it with the same focused attention she brought to everything. He paused. There's something in there I can't identify. Good, she said. Things you can identify can be replicated. Things you can't stay yours. He held the cup in both hands and looked at her and felt the distinct and clarifying sensation of a man who has just understood something about what he's been looking for. Are you always this interesting before 9 a.m.? He asked. She picked up her phone. Smiled without looking at him. I own a coffee shop. I have to be. He came back the next morning. And the morning after that. By the end of his first week, it had become a thing. Not a thing they named or agreed to, it simply organized itself, the way certain arrangements do when both people are too honest to pretend they don't know what's happening and too careful to rush it. He arrived at grounds at 8. She was there. He sat at the bar. She made him something different each day. They talked. They talked the way people talked when they'd both been very lonely in very quiet ways and didn't know how much they'd missed the particular intimacy of a real conversation until they were inside one. He told her about Copenhagen and Lagos and the company in Austin he'd turned around from 12 employees to 120 in 18 months. She told him about the Parlor, about the loan she'd gotten on the strength of a business plan and a reputation, and the willingness to bet her last nerve on herself. About the build-out that had taken 11 months and aged her 5 years. About the morning she'd opened the doors for the first time and stood in the center of what she'd made and cried for 45 minutes because it was real. You cried, he said. Not surprised, something else. Like the information was important. I'm not made of marble, she said. No, he agreed. His voice was careful. You're not. They didn't talk about the divorce or the 8-year relationship. They didn't talk about what they wanted or what they were afraid of. But those things were present in the conversations anyway, the way significant things always are, moving just below the surface, shaping everything they touched. On Friday afternoon, she came to the second floor with a cold brew and a small matter that required his opinion on whether the Parlor should add standing desks to the suite or keep the current walnut tables. She sat in the chair across from him, and they talked for 20 minutes, and he realized, partway through, that she hadn't actually needed his opinion. She'd already decided. She wanted the conversation. She wanted to be in the room. He was so grateful he almost said so. Instead he said, I've extended my stay. Her expression shifted. Just slightly. Just enough to matter. How long? A month. Maybe more. He held her gaze. I'm finding things here I didn't expect. She stood. Smoothed her apron. Picked up the cold brew that she'd meant for him and forgotten to hand over. She set it on the desk with deliberate care. I'm glad, she said. And walked out. She went straight to Maya. Say nothing, Rachel told her. Maya put both hands up. I'm not saying a single word. Good. I'm just thinking them very loudly. Rachel made herself an espresso, drank it standing, and went back to her invoices. The building hummed around her. The coffee smelled like morning. William Dean was 1 floor above her, in the room she'd chosen, at the desk she'd found in Savannah. She had built a beautiful space. She had not expected it to feel this inhabited. Chapter 3, Gravity. The thing about chemistry, real chemistry, not the kind that burns fast and leaves ash, was that it didn't announce itself. It accumulated. It built the way water shapes stone, slowly, consistently, through 1,000 small moments that seemed unremarkable until you looked up one day and found that everything had been changed. Rachel understood this intellectually. She had been shaped by the wrong kind of heat before. David had been intensity, quick and consuming, and completely unable to sustain itself past the initial blaze. She had learned to distrust speed. She had learned to distrust her own wanting. But she was not a woman who could lie to herself for long. Something was happening in her building. In the 8 a.m. conversations at the bar. In the way William Dean listened fully, without the impatience that most people brought to other people's sentences. In the way he asked questions that assumed she was someone worth understanding. David had never asked questions like that. David had already known who she was supposed to be. She pushed the thought away. It wasn't useful. What was useful? Inventory. The plumber's bill. The second-floor light fixture that kept buzzing. The new member inquiry that had come in from a law firm wanting 6 dedicated desks. Life had texture, and texture was what kept a person grounded. She was reviewing the law firm inquiry on a Tuesday afternoon, 10 days into William's tenancy, when he appeared in the doorway of her office. Her office was small and personal in a way the rest of the parlor wasn't. Bookshelves covering 2 walls, a worn leather chair she'd had since college, a whiteboard covered in her particular system of notes that made sense only to her. It was the room where she was most herself, which was why she almost never let anyone in it. "I have a problem," William said from the doorway. "Is it the window unit?" "It's not the window unit." She put down the inquiry. "What is it?" He came in, not all the way, just enough to be in the room. He looked at the bookshelves with the attentive way he looked at everything. She watched him read spines and felt suddenly exposed, the way you did when someone could see you're reading life. "My client wants to do the meeting here," he said. "In one of your conference rooms. Wednesday at 2. There will be 4 of them, and they're used to a certain kind of environment." "Impressive," she said. "Exactly. I know it's short notice. I can pay for the room. You're already paying for the suite." She pulled up the booking system. "Conference room A has the good chairs. I'll have Maya set it up. Do you need catering? Would you do the coffee personally?" She looked up from her screen. He was watching her with that particular quality of attention, steady, warm, and layered with something he kept just below naming. "I've been telling them about grounds. They're the kind of people who notice the difference. The kind of people who drink cortados in conference rooms. The kind who know when something is exceptional." A pause. The word exceptional sat in the air between them with a weight that was not entirely about coffee. She held the moment for 2 full seconds. 3. "I'll do the coffee," she said. "Go back to work." He smiled, slow, private, like a thought he decided to share just a little, and left. Rachel sat still for a moment after he'd gone. She was aware of her own pulse. She was aware of the warmth in the room that hadn't been there before he came in. She was aware of the specific, clarifying quality of wanting something and knowing it and being afraid of it and wanting it anyway. She pulled the law firm inquiry back toward her. Read the first line 3 times without processing it. She was not fine. She was something better than fine. She was not ready to admit what that was yet. The client meeting was on Wednesday. Rachel prepared the coffee with the same attention she brought to the most important things she made, grinding the beans herself, calibrating the temperature by sense as much as thermometer, choosing the particular blend that said welcome and substance without being showy about it. Maya watched her from across the bar. "You're doing the thing again. I'm making coffee. You're making coffee for him. I'm making coffee for his clients. You washed that dripper 3 times." Rachel set the dripper down with tremendous dignity. "I wash things thoroughly." She brought the service up to conference room A at 1:50. The room was empty. She'd arranged it the way she arranged everything, with careful attention to what the space was being asked to do. Fresh flowers from the market. Water in glass carafes. The chairs arranged around the table at angles that suggested collaboration without imposing it. William was in the hall outside, on his phone, jacket on now, transformed slightly by the professional posture he wore over his natural ease. He saw her and held up one finger, wait, and finished the call. "Everything okay?" she asked. "They're early. 3 minutes out." He looked at the room through the open door. Something moved across his face, relief, gratitude, something else. Rachel. The way he said her name. She'd noticed it before. He said it like it belonged to her specifically, not a general address, but a specific one, like he was being careful with it. "It looks exactly right," he said. "Thank you. That's what the space is for." He looked at her then with the full weight of his attention, and she felt it in the specific way she felt the best things, as a kind of warm pressure behind the sternum, something that asked to be recognized. "I know," he said. "But you went further than the space required." She handed him the coffee service. Their hands were close but did not touch. The proximity was enough to be aware of the particular warmth of another person's presence in the inches between contact and restraint. "Good luck with your meeting," she said. "Stay close." A pause. "In case they need anything. I'll be at the bar." She walked away. She was very aware of the precise length of her own stride. She went to the bar. She made herself a black coffee she didn't need. She stayed close. He found her afterward at 4:30. The clients had gone. The conference room was quiet. He sat at the bar and she read everything she needed to in his expression before he said a word. "It went well," she said. "It went better than I deserved." He looked at the bar top. Then at her. The coffee. The room. The way everything felt like I belonged here. Like I knew what I was doing. "You did know what you were doing. I felt steadier because of this place. Because of you." The confession sat between them. Plainly. He hadn't dressed it up or obscured it. He'd just said it, the way he said most things, with the directness of a man who decided that honesty was less dangerous than its alternative. She picked up a cloth and wiped down the bar, not because it needed it, because she needed something to do with her hands. "You're going to make me say it first," he said. Quietly. Without accusation. "Say what?" "What this is." She put the cloth down. Looked at him. "What do you think this is?" He leaned forward, forearms on the bar. Close enough that she could see the particular brown of his eyes, dark and warm and patient. I think, he said, that you're the most interesting person I've been in a room with in a very long time. And I think you feel something when I'm near you that you're not sure you trust yet. And I think I'd like to take you to dinner and give you a reason to start trusting it. Silence. The building breathed around them. Rachel Hendrix, who had built a business from a loan and a nerve, who had walked away from a marriage that tried to make her smaller, who had learned to love things that couldn't leave her without a fight, looked at William Dean and felt the particular, terrifying, magnificent sensation of a door swinging open. Friday, she said. I close at 7. His smile was slow and warm and completely his own. I'll be here at 7:05, he said. Part 2. The Language Before Language. Chapter 4. Friday at 7:05. He was there at 7:04. She saw him through the bar window while she was pulling the last of the espresso shots of the evening, and the sight of him, standing in the hall in a deep navy shirt and dark slacks, checking his watch with the quiet, focused energy of a man who didn't want to be late, did something complicated to her chest that she refused to examine too closely. She untied her apron, ran her hands underwater, looked at Maya. Maya looked back with the composed and entirely unconvincing expression of someone not thinking anything at all. Lock up at 8, Rachel said. Of course. And don't text me. I would never. Maya. Have a good time, Rachel. She walked out of grounds and William turned at the sound of her, and the look on his face when he saw her, unhurried and warm and entirely present, was the kind of look a person didn't manufacture. It was just true. She had worn a deep wine-colored wrap dress because she owned it, and it was a good dress, not because of anything. She had done her hair the way she liked it. She was not dressing for him. She was dressing for a Friday evening in which she happened to be having dinner with a man she was not letting herself think too hard about. You look beautiful, he said. Simply. No performance in it. You're on time. Early, he corrected. Impressively on time. He offered his arm in the old-fashioned way that wasn't old-fashioned at all when done by someone who meant it, and she took it because her hands needed somewhere to be. He took her to a small Ethiopian restaurant 12 blocks away that she had walked past 100 times and never entered. The kind of place that required knowing no signage beyond a name etched into glass, dim warm light, the smell of berbera and cardamom that wrapped around them like something ancestral and welcoming. How did you find this? She asked. I spent 2 weeks walking every street in this neighborhood before I booked the Parlor. I find places the way I find everything, on foot, slowly, paying attention. They were given a table in the back, seated across from each other, and the intimacy of the arrangement, the small table, the candle, the way the restaurant seemed to understand that they needed privacy, felt like someone had arranged it for them specifically. They ordered together, sharing a spread the way the menu suggested, and William poured the tej, the honey wine, with the careful attention he brought to everything involving her. Tell me something true, he said. She looked up. About what? About you. Something that isn't on the website. The Parlor has a very modest website. Then it shouldn't be hard. She held the tej and thought about it honestly. I almost didn't open the shop. The business case was there. The office space needed an anchor tenant for the common area. A coffee operation made financial sense. But the morning I was going to sign the equipment lease, I called my mother and told her I was afraid it was too much. That I was stretching too far. What did she say? She said, Rachel, you have always been exactly as much as the world needs. The world just hasn't caught up yet. She paused. I signed the lease. He was quiet for a moment. She sounds extraordinary. She is. She died 4 years ago. I'm sorry. She saw the plans for the Parlor before she went. She sat in the empty space and said, I can feel what this is going to be. That was enough. Rachel traced the rim of her glass. Your turn. Something true. He thought about it the same way, seriously, without deflecting. I left a relationship 8 months ago that I'd been in for 8 years. We ended it well. With honesty and without cruelty, which I'm grateful for. But I've been carrying a very specific grief that had nothing to do with her, the grief of time spent building towards something that finally and clearly wasn't going to be built. He looked at her. I came to this city not looking for anything. I'd been not looking for 8 months and I was getting good at it. And now? Now I'm sitting across from you in the best restaurant I've been in 3 years, and I'm very interested in looking again. The food arrived and they ate, and the conversation opened up, wide and ranging and alive. The way conversations were when both people had been genuinely curious about the world and were finally in a room with someone who matched that. They talked about cities and what they taught. About the difference between ambition and hunger. About books. About their fathers. About the specific texture of choosing yourself after a long time of choosing someone else. They closed the restaurant without realizing it, the staff moving quietly around them, collecting other tables, until the owner came over with a warmth that said he was not annoyed, only amused. You talk for a long time, he said approvingly. We do, William said. And looked at Rachel when he said it. He walked her back to the Parlor, where she'd left her car. The night had cooled and the city had the particular quality of late Friday, loosened, lit, full of the sounds of other people's good evenings. They stood outside the building's front door, and the moment between walking and parting had a specific weight that they both felt, and neither rushed. "I'd like to do this again," William said. "We haven't even finished this one," she said. He smiled. "Is it not finished? You walked me to my car. That's the end." "I thought that was the beginning of the ending." She looked up at him, and the streetlight was doing something specific to the planes of his face, and she was very aware of the closeness, the distance between them that was neither far nor close, but had its own particular electricity. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "For finding that place. For asking true questions. Thank you for answering them." A pause. He didn't close the distance, he simply held the moment, which she understood as a form of respect. He was asking her, without words, where the evening ended. He was putting it in her hands. She appreciated that more than she had words for. She closed the distance herself. Not much, just enough. Her hand found his lapel, a small anchoring touch, and she pressed her mouth to his cheek. Just to the left of his jaw. Brief and warm and deliberate. She felt him go still. Not with surprise, with attention. Like every part of him had oriented toward that small point of contact. She stepped back. "Saturday," she said. "I'm here in the morning if you want coffee." "I want coffee," he said. His voice had changed texture, lower, warmer, deliberate. She smiled. Got in her car. Did not look in the rearview mirror until the first stoplight, and when she did, he was still there. She drove home feeling like a woman who had remembered something important about herself. Chapter 5. The Education of Saturday Morning. He was at the bar at 7:45. She had been there since 5. She was always there since 5. But she'd been aware of time differently this morning, checking the clock with a frequency she did not want to examine. When he came in, he was not yet fully assembled. This was new. All week he'd arrived ready, pressed, purposeful, professional. This morning he'd come in a fitted black t-shirt and dark joggers, a coffee-colored jacket over it that he hadn't bothered to button. He looked like what he was, a man in his home city on a Saturday morning, going somewhere easy. He looked good. He looked distractingly, annoyingly good. She made him the cortado without asking. Set it in front of him. Poured herself a cup of the pour-over she'd been holding at temperature for the past hour and sat on the stool on her side of the bar, something she never did when the space was occupied, but it was early and they were alone, and the conventions were loosening. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Adequately. You?" "Better than I have in a while." He tasted the cortado. Let the silence breathe. "I kept thinking about the restaurant. The food was exceptional." "I wasn't thinking about the food." She held her cup with both hands. The morning light was coming through the east-facing window, and it was doing something generous to the space, softening the brick, warming the wood, making grounds feel, in this particular hour, like somewhere outside of time. "What were you thinking about?" she asked. He looked at her directly. "The moment outside. When you closed the distance." Her pulse did something she refused to dignify. It was a friendly gesture. It was not a friendly gesture. It was very friendly. "Rachel." The way he said it, unhurried, certain, the name held like something worth holding. "It was not a friendly gesture, and you know it, and I know it, and I think we've both been careful enough for long enough to be honest." She set her cup down. Looked at him. This was the choice, the real one, not the dinner or the walk back, but this. The choice to stop pretending she was not standing at the edge of something. "I'm careful," she said, "because the last time I wasn't. It cost me 3 years of repair work." "I know." His voice was gentle. "I'm not asking you not to be careful. I'm asking you to be careful with me instead of careful for me." The distinction landed precisely where he'd aimed it. She breathed. "What do you want, William?" "You. Honestly. With all the time it takes and no shortcuts and no pretending I don't know what I want." He leaned forward on the bar. "I want to take you somewhere again. I want more of those conversations. I want to learn this city the way I learned that restaurant, slowly, on foot, paying attention. With you." The morning held them. A bus moved by outside. The espresso machine ticked. Somewhere above them, the parlor breathed in its particular weekend quiet. "This is my building," she said. "If this goes badly." "No. You're a temporary tenant. I've extended twice. I'm not as temporary as I was." "William." "Rachel." Same tone. Same weight. Like a mirror. She stood up. Came around to his side of the bar, something she had not done before, the crossing of that small geography, the removal of the physical structure between them. She stopped close enough that she would have to reach only a few inches. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I don't do this halfway. I never have. If I decide to," she stopped. Began again. "I have rebuilt myself from the kind of love that took without asking, and I am not small anymore. I will not be small again. If something grows between us, it grows between equals or it doesn't grow at all. That's the only kind I want," he said. She believed him. She believed him the way she believed good construction, not because it sounded right, but because you could feel the solidity in it. She put her hand against his chest, open palm, deliberate, the full warmth of her hand over his heartbeat, and felt him breathe. "Then we can start here," she said. He put his hand over hers. Held it there. The gesture was simple and complete, not a prelude to anything, just itself. Two people agreeing to be at the beginning of something. "Here is a very good place to start," he said. They spent the morning in the coffee shop, talking until the regulars arrived, and then she gave him a tour of the parlor, the real one, not the orientation she gave new tenants. She showed him the original brick under the plaster on the 3rd floor that she'd discovered during the renovation. She showed him the 4th floor podcast studio, which she was proudest of because sound engineering was something she'd had to learn from scratch, and the room was acoustically near perfect. She showed him the storage room that she was planning, eventually, to convert into a wellness space. He listened to all of it with the attention he'd given everything since his first day, the kind of listening that wasn't waiting for its turn to speak. The kind that remembered. "This 4th floor room," he said. "The sound engineering. You learned it yourself. YouTube and a very patient contractor who took my calls at 11 p.m. You are consistently more than you present." "I present plenty," she said. "You do. And there's still more." He was looking at a photograph she'd framed on the studio wall, the building mid-renovation, raw and skeletal, with her standing in the center of the gutted space in a hard hat, arms wide. She looked young in it. She looked invincible. "How old are you there?" 32. "You look terrified and certain at the same time." She looked at the photograph. "I was. Both. It's possible to be both." "Yes," he said. He was looking at her now, not the photograph. "I know." She understood he wasn't only talking about the building. They had lunch from the taqueria downstairs, sitting on the rooftop. She'd also not shown new tenants, which had a half-finished garden situation she was committed to and struggling with, and a view of the city that justified the rent for the entire top floor on its own. He sat across from her on a blanket she'd retrieved from her office, and the afternoon was warm and the food was good, and at some point the conversation settled into one of those quiet intervals that feel not like emptiness, but like fullness. Like everything that needed to be said had been said, and what remained was simply being. She was aware of the closeness. He was close enough to reach. He was close enough that the warmth of him was a distinct thing, separate from the afternoon sun, specific to him. "Come here," she said. He looked at her with that stillness. Then he closed the distance, moving to sit beside her, and she leaned into him, not dramatically, just the side of her shoulder finding the side of his, the angle of her head tipping toward him. His arm came around her. Slow, patient. Like he was asking through the gesture and waiting for her body to answer. Her body answered. She settled against him. His arm was warm and solid and fit the architecture of her shoulder like it had been there before. They stayed that way for a long time, watching the city from the roof of the building she'd built, not saying anything at all. This was also a kind of conversation. This was, in fact, the most honest one they'd had yet. Chapter 6, First Contact. It was a Sunday, 9 days after dinner, when the careful distance between them finally, consensually, beautifully collapsed. She had texted him at noon. "The rooftop garden is staging a rebellion against me. Do you have opinions on tomato steaks?" He had responded within 2 minutes. "I know nothing about tomato steaks. I'll be there in 20. He arrived with nothing useful and everything necessary. He stood in her failing rooftop garden and gave his honest assessment, cheerful, useless, delivered with the straight face of a man who had genuinely tried to develop an opinion, and she laughed so freely and so suddenly that she surprised herself. David had not made her laugh like that. David had made her prove herself. There was a difference so large between those two experiences that the contrast was almost architectural. They spent an hour on the roof, she actually working, he handing her things she asked for and offering commentary that was entirely based on confidence and entirely divorced from knowledge. And at some point she sat back on her heels and looked at him and felt something she hadn't felt in so long she'd almost stopped expecting it. Safe. She felt safe. Not because he was gentle, though he was. Not because he was careful, though he was that too. She felt safe because he was consistent. Every version of him she'd seen across these 2 weeks, professional, morning casual, attentive, playful, honest, had been the same person wearing the same self. He was not performing for her. He was not managing her. He was just there, in her garden, being exactly what he was. She stood up, crossed the space between them, put both hands on his face the way she'd been wanting to since Friday outside the building, since Thursday when he'd leaned forward on her bar, since the first morning when he'd received the cortado in both hands like it mattered. He went still. The way he always did when she came close. Complete, gathered attention. "I want to kiss you," she said. "Rachel." His voice, low and steady. "You have my full permission to make every decision here." She kissed him. It was not a small kiss or a tentative one. It was a first kiss in the truest sense, full and honest and carrying everything they'd been building for 2 weeks, all the conversation and the proximity and the deliberate, respectful restraint. He kissed her back the same way, with his whole self, one hand coming up to rest at her waist, the other rising slowly to cup her jaw, and the warmth of it moved through her like something returning after a long absence. They broke apart, and she stayed close, forehead almost to his, her hands still on his face. Both of them breathing. That, he said, was exactly what I thought it would be. What did you think it would be? Necessary, he said. Like breathing. She kissed him again, softer this time, getting acquainted. Learning the particular way his mouth responded. His hands stayed where they were, one at her waist, one at her jaw, and she felt in his restraint a thing she hadn't expected, desire held in careful respect. He wanted more. She could feel that plainly. But he wasn't taking. He was receiving. Savoring. She'd never been with a man who savored. They stood on the roof of her building and kissed until the afternoon light shifted and the city's evening sounds began to rise from below. And when they finally pulled back and looked at each other, she felt the specific and particular sensation of a woman who has not forgotten who she is, but has perhaps remembered that she is also more than she'd been allowing. Stay, she said. For dinner. I'll stay, he said. For as long as you want me. She believed him. She was right to. Chapter 7. The First Night. She cooked. She cooked the way she made coffee attentively, by feel as much as recipe, knowing the dish well enough to improvise. Seared salmon with a butter that had herbs from what remained of her roof garden's success, roasted root vegetables, the last of the good wine she'd been saving for an occasion worth saving it for. He sat at her kitchen island and watched her the way he watched everything, as though the watching was itself a pleasure. He asked questions about what she was doing. Not to fill silence, but because he was genuinely interested, turning the answers over, connecting them to other things. You cook like you build things, he said. What does that mean? Like you understand the whole structure before you start. Like you've already eaten the meal in your mind and now you're making it real. She looked at him over the pan. That's how my mother cooked. She said you have to know where you're going before you can take anyone there. She was right about more than the cooking. They ate at her table with the windows open, the city coming in through the screen in Friday evening fragments. She'd lit 2 candles not because of any intention but because she liked candlelight and this was her home, and she would light candles in her home on a Sunday evening if she chose to. He poured the wine and tasted it and gave her the look that meant he was thinking something complimentary and choosing how to say it. Say it, she said. You have impeccable taste in everything. You mean the wine? I mean everything. The silence between them was charged and warm, and neither of them looked away from it. They were both adults who knew what the evening was becoming. There was nothing coy in it, no game, no pretending not to know. Just 2 people who'd moved toward each other carefully and honestly and were now in the particular, electric proximity of a decision already made. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. I want you to know something, she said. Tell me. I haven't been with anyone since the divorce. It's been 2 years. I'm telling you that not for sympathy, but because I want there to be honesty between us about where we're both standing. He turned his hand under hers so their palms were together. I appreciate that. And I want you to know that I'm here fully. Not passing through. Not practicing. Here. I know, she said. She did know. She'd known it for days. She stood. He stood. They came around the table to each other, and the kiss this time was different from the roof. Less discovery, more arrival. They'd found the coordinates already. Now they were simply landing. His hands moved to her waist, and she pressed into him and felt his warmth, his solidity, the full presence of a man who was not somewhere else in his head. He was entirely here. She felt it in every point of contact. Rachel, he said, against her mouth. Yes, she said. Not answering a question. Just yes. He pulled back enough to look at her. To ask without asking. She took his hand and led him down the hall. Her room was hers in the particular way all private spaces were, the books stacked on the nightstand, the plants in the window that she talked to when she was stressed, the lamp with the warm amber shade that made everything look like something worth keeping. She had not planned for this night specifically, but she had always kept her home the way she kept everything, with care, with intention, as though anything might be worth seeing clearly. He looked at her room the way he'd looked at her office, reading it the way he read everything, with genuine interest. You have a lot of books by your bed, he said. I'm always reading 4 things at once. What are you reading now? We can discuss that another time. She reached for his jacket. He let her slide it from his shoulders, watching her with the full, warm weight of his attention. She set it on the chair and her hands went to his shirt, the buttons, unhurried, deliberate, each one a small decision that he received with the same patience he brought to everything. Tell me what you want, he said quietly. What feels good? What doesn't? I want to know you. The directness of it, the plain, adult honesty, opened something in her chest she hadn't realized was closed. She had been with men who guessed or assumed or waited to be corrected. She had never been with a man who simply asked, at the beginning, as a matter of course, as a form of respect. "I want to feel present," she said. "I want to know you're here." "I'm here," he said. "I will keep telling you so." He kept his word. He told her with his hands, which were deliberate and warm and knew exactly how to learn her slowly, attentively, with the patience of a man who understood that discovery was the destination, not just the path. He told her with his voice, low and certain, naming what he saw and felt, turning the room's warmth into something even warmer, something that had words and weight and the particular intimacy of being seen accurately while also being touched. "You are," he said at one point, his voice pressed to her collarbone, "so remarkably yourself." She understood what he meant. He meant that she had not disappeared, that she was still, fully, Rachel in this bed, in his arms, in the warmth of everything they were making between them. She was not performing or diminishing. She was wholly herself and wholly present, and the combination was making something she couldn't have named but felt in every bone. She had forgotten what this felt like. She had forgotten that it could feel like this, expansive rather than small, building rather than consuming. She had forgotten that the body, treated with honesty and patience and genuine care, could open like a second language coming back. It opened. She opened. And he was there for all of it, attentive, present, speaking her name with the same care he'd brought to it since the very first morning, as though her name was something worth saying correctly. Afterward, she lay with her head against his chest and listened to his heart settle, and he held her the way he'd held everything he'd been given, with both hands, like it mattered. "Still here," he said quietly. Into her hair. She smiled against him. "Still here," she confirmed. She had not felt this particular kind of safe in a very long time. The kind that didn't ask you to be less. The kind that expanded around you rather than contracting. She fell asleep to the sound of the city and his breathing and did not dream about anything hard. Chapter 8. The Architecture of Trust. He was still there in the morning. She knew before she opened her eyes his warmth was specific and unmistakable, the particular weight of his arm across her, the sound of his breathing in a register that meant he was just beginning to surface. She lay still for a moment and let herself have it, the uncomplicated morning fact of him. She'd forgotten this part. The morning after. With David, mornings had carried an edge, a re-establishment of hierarchy, the subtle reassertion of who was centered, who served. She had learned to wake up already braced. This morning, she was not braced. This morning she was simply warm. She turned over, and he was watching her with the particular expression of a man who had been awake for a few minutes and found the watching sufficient reason to stay still. "Good morning," he said. His voice was lower in the morning, more unguarded. "Good morning." She looked at him. "You stayed. You didn't ask me to leave. You're observant." Among other things. He reached over and tucked a strand of hair from her face with the kind of ease that didn't come from performance. It was a natural gesture, an old-soul gesture, like this was already familiar. Like they already had mornings. She did not flinch from the intimacy of it. That was how she knew something had changed. He made breakfast. She had not asked him to, and he had not made a production of offering. He'd simply gotten up, found her kitchen the way he found every space he entered, and started. She sat at the island with her coffee and watched him move through her space, with a naturalness that should have been too soon and somehow wasn't. "You know how to cook," she said. "I lived alone in 6 cities. You learn." He plated the eggs with the same care he brought to everything. "Or you eat sad sandwiches for 2 years. I chose to learn." "What was the saddest city?" He sat across from her. Thought about it. "Helsinki. January. I was there for a contract that ran 4 months, and the sun set at 3 in the afternoon, and I didn't know anyone, and I was very busy pretending that was fine." "Was it fine?" "No. But I got very good at the pretending. And I learned to make a genuinely exceptional potato dish, so it wasn't a total loss." He smiled. "What was yours?" "My what?" "Your sad city. The place where you were going through something and doing it alone." She ate. Considered. "I was here. That's the thing people don't realize about going through something hard. It doesn't require a different city. I was in my own apartment, in the city I'd lived in for 12 years, surrounded by everything familiar, and I had never been lonelier in my life. The divorce. The divorce. And the year before it, when I knew what was coming and was still trying to make it work." She looked at her coffee. He didn't believe in what I was building. He thought it was indulgent. A woman playing at business instead of making one. William was quiet. "He was wrong," she said. Simply. As a fact. "He was catastrophically wrong," William said. "And I'm sorry you had to carry that. I don't need the apology. I know. It's not for you. It's because hearing about someone treating you like that makes me want to say something about it, and that's the truest thing I have." She looked at him across her kitchen table and felt the specific, expanding sensation of being understood by someone who did not need her to be simpler in order to understand her. "What do we do now?" she asked. Not anxiously. Just honestly. "We eat breakfast," he said. We figure out the tomatoes. We go where this takes us without running ahead of it. And professionally, you're my tenant. I'm your tenant who is going to continue paying his suite fees and using the conference rooms for client meetings and buying coffee from grounds every morning. A pause. And I'm going to come back to you at the end of the day because I want to. And those two things don't have to be complicated. She ate her eggs. They were exactly right. The way everything he did was exactly right, not through perfection, but through genuine attention. We can do that, she said. Yes, he said. We can. Chapter 9. What the Body Learns. The second time was different from the first in the way second things always were, less discovery, more depth. They had the first language now, they were building vocabulary. He came to her midweek, after a long day in which she'd been on back-to-back calls, dealt with a difficult member complaint, found a leak in the third-floor bathroom, and lost the second hour of her afternoon to a conversation with a contractor who quoted numbers she couldn't reconcile with reality. By the time she came down to grounds to close up, she was carrying the quiet, physical weight of a day that had asked everything of her. He was at the bar. Not having waited, just there, working, doing what he did in her space with the ease she'd grown accustomed to. He looked up when she came in and read her the way he read everything, and his face shifted into something careful and warm. Sit, he said. I'll close up. You don't know how to close up. Maya texted me the checklist. She stopped. Maya texted you the checklist. She worries about you having to do everything yourself at the end of a hard day. She texted me. He was already moving around the bar. Sit down, Rachel. She sat down. She let him close up her shop. She watched him move through the ritual of it, the careful learned attention he brought to anything he'd decided to do correctly, and felt something release in her shoulders that she hadn't known was held. He brought her a cup of something warm and sat across from her at the bar. Tell me about the day, he said. She did. All of it, the complaint, the leak, the contractor, the particular exhaustion of being the person who held all the threads and could not drop any of them. He listened without interrupting, asked two precise questions that showed he'd understood the architecture of what she was carrying, and then was quiet for a moment. You take exceptional care of everything in this building, he said. Does anyone take care of you? The question landed somewhere undefended. I take care of myself. That's not what I asked. She held the cup. Not lately. No. Come here. She went around the bar to him, and he put his arms around her and held her, just held her, without agenda, without prelude, his chin resting on the top of her head and his arms full and steady around her, and she felt the specific, complicated unwinding of a woman who had been holding her own weight for a very long time. She didn't cry. She was not going to cry at the bar of her own business at 9:30 on a Tuesday. She breathed. She leaned into him. She let herself be held. Better, he asked after a while. Different, she said. Better adjacent. He laughed softly. The vibration of it against her was its own kind of warmth. She looked up at him. Take me home. His expression was attentive and careful. Are you sure? You're tired. I know what I am and what I want. Take me home. He took her home. In bed this time, the language was fuller. She had told him on Sunday what she needed: presence, honesty, the continuous fact of being heard, and he had given her that. Now she knew what else she wanted to tell him. She had a particular nature in intimacy that she had never fully trusted anyone with. She'd known it about herself for years, the way she responded to certain kinds of authority, the specific tenderness that opened in her when she felt genuinely cared for. The combination of surrender and demand that had lived in her like a language she'd never found a fluent speaker for. I want to tell you something, she said. They were close, warm, the quiet after the first wave of the evening settling around them like something earned. Tell me. I respond to, she paused. Found the words. I like when you tell me what you're doing. When you name it. I like the voice and the words together with the touch. Does that make sense? He was looking at her with complete and gentle attention. It makes perfect sense. And I want you to know that I love knowing that. He pushed himself up to look at her fully. Is there more? The trust required to answer that question was enormous. She'd built walls around this particular knowledge for a decade. I like when you're in charge, she said. Not all the time. Not in ways that take, but in bed, when I trust someone, when they've earned it, I like to give that over. To someone who holds it carefully. The silence in the room was full. He reached over and touched her face with the backs of his fingers, the gentlest possible contact. Thank you for trusting me with that, he said. I will hold it carefully. Always. And you tell me every time what is good and what isn't. That's not negotiable. You keep your voice. I keep my voice, she agreed. And if anything ever feels wrong, you say so, and we stop, full stop, no questions. Yes. Good. His hand moved from her face to her jaw, and his grip, while gentle, firmed with intention. The shift was small and precise, and she felt it everywhere, a full-body response that she recognized as the specific language of what she'd been describing. He was already fluent. He was already paying attention to exactly the right things. Now, he said, his voice dropping to something low and deliberate, let me show you that I heard you. He did. He showed her with the unhurried command of a man who understood that authority in intimacy was not about size or force, but about complete, focused attention to the person before him. He told her what he was going to do before he did it, not performatively, but naturally, the way someone might narrate a discovery they were making, one that pleased them deeply. He moved through her deliberately, each point of contact named and answered, the conversation between their bodies having the same quality as every other conversation they'd had, honest, layered, unhurried. She gave herself over to it completely. For the first time in longer than she could pinpoint, she gave herself over without reservation, trusting the arms around her, trusting the voice, trusting the consistency of the man who had been exactly himself since the first morning. Something came loose in her that had been knotted for years. It didn't break. It unlocked. There was a profound difference. Part 3. The Third Party. Chapter 10. Lena and David. Lena Zimmerman was very beautiful and knew it the way some people knew their native language, not with vanity, but with the casual fluency of someone who'd simply never not had it. She was 33, a freelance creative director with a client list that read like a glossy magazine's masthead, and she had lived in the city for 2 years since leaving William's orbit in Minneapolis. She had needed to go somewhere that wasn't about him or what they'd been. She had done that here. She had built something clean and light and entirely her own. She was fine. She had always been fine. She was the kind of fine that required a great deal of beautiful surfaces and very little excavation. She met David Johnson at a gallery opening in the Arts District on a Thursday night when she was there for a client, and he was there because he liked to be somewhere people noticed him. He was well-dressed and good-looking in a practiced way, the kind of handsome that announced itself, that had been deployed strategically for long enough to become instinct. He had broad shoulders and an easy smile, and the particular confidence of a man who expected rooms to recognize him. You're the most put-together person in this building, he said, materializing beside her with a glass of wine she hadn't asked for. It was not a remarkable line. But he delivered it with an authority that said he believed in it, and there was something in the believing that she responded to before she thought about whether she should. Thank you, she said. Took the wine. And you are? David Johnson. I'm in real estate development. What about you? Creative direction. She looked at the paintings on the wall. Your client or your preference? Neither. I come where the interesting people are. He was already looking at her rather than the art. Are you from here? Minneapolis, originally. You? Born here. Never left. He said it like a credential. Some people call it staying put. I call it knowing where you belong. Lena thought of William, who had never been able to stop moving. Thought of all the cities. All the hotels. All the particular loneliness of living alongside someone whose restlessness made everywhere feel temporary. I think I understand that, she said. Have dinner with me, David said. Not a question, exactly. Not aggressive, just confident. Tomorrow. Wherever you want. I know the city inside out. She looked at him for a moment. He was looking back with the full voltage of his attention, and she recognized in it something she had always been drawn to, a man who had decided. She had been with William, who was thoughtful and considered and who weighed every decision carefully. She had loved him for that and also grown, quietly, exhausted by it. David looked like someone who did not weigh things carefully at all. Tomorrow, she said. I'll text you the place. She gave him her number because she wanted to. Because she was fine and free and allowed to want things. She did not know, walking home that night, that she had just made the choice that would unlock the next chapter of her life, not in the way she expected, not in any comfortable direction, but with the irreversibility of all real choices. David Johnson had not grieved the divorce the way a person grieved. He had metabolized it. He had taken the injury of Rachel leaving, of Rachel succeeding, of Rachel building something without him that everyone seemed to admire, and converted it, the way he converted most things, into fuel. He was a man who ran on narrative. He needed to be the protagonist of his own story, and Rachel's departure had been a structural problem. It had made him the person who was left, rather than the person who chose. He had spent 2 years rewriting the story in his head. The version he told himself now was manageable. Rachel had been too driven, too stubborn, too unwilling to understand that a partnership required compromise. He had given her everything, and she had chosen her ambition over the relationship. He was the reasonable party. He had always been the reasonable party. He believed this the way he believed all his own narratives completely, because he had constructed the belief with care and needed it to function. What he had not metabolized, because it was not metabolizable, was the building. The Parlor had become a small local success story, the kind that turned up in city lifestyle magazines, in Instagram features about Black women in business, in the recommendation lists that circulated through the city's professional class. He had read every one of these features with a meticulous, poisonous attention he would never have admitted to anyone. She had done what she said she would do. The The thing he told her was too much, too ambitious, too risky. She had done it without him. He did not call this jealousy. He called it concern. He was very good at renaming things. When Lena walked into his life like something clean and luminous and impressively unbothered by anything, he felt the particular relief of a man who had found a new audience. She was not Rachel. She was lighter. She didn't build things from the ground. She made existing things beautiful. She moved through the world with an ease that made his company feel like an achievement rather than a negotiation. He fell for her quickly and genuinely, in his way, which was to say, completely on his own terms, shaped around what she could do for the version of himself he wanted to be. She fell for him with the particular open-handedness of a woman who had just finished 8 years of measured, cautious loving and found speed refreshing. Neither of them asked, in the first weeks of their mutual infatuation, too many questions about the exes they'd left behind. Neither of them knew that those exes had found each other. Neither of them knew what was already being built, one morning coffee at a time, one rooftop afternoon at a time, in a building 12 blocks from where they ate their Thursday dinners. They were about to find out. Chapter 11. The Collision of Worlds. It was Maya who found out first. Maya, who had accounts on everything and followed everything and was the kind of person who kept tabs on the world's social geography the way a general kept tabs on terrain, saw the photograph first, a tall, well-dressed man with familiar bone structure tagged at a restaurant Rachel had mentioned once a year ago when she was trying to explain what David had done to her sense of self. She looked at it for a long time. Looked at the woman beside him, who was striking and polished and had the slightly unfocused smile of someone in the early, intoxicating stage of something new. She put her phone down, picked it up, set it down again. She thought about not telling Rachel. She thought about this for approximately 14 minutes. "Rachel," she said, appearing in the door of the back office. Rachel looked up from a lease renewal. "What's wrong? I need you to look at something and I need you to understand that I am showing you because you should know, not because I think it should affect anything about." "Maya." "Show me." She looked at the photograph for a long time. David, who she knew the specific weight of and had spent 2 years learning to put down. And a woman beside him who looked, from the photograph, like the kind of woman who made things easy. She felt nothing sharp. She felt something dull and complicated, not jealousy, not the pain of his presence, but something more textured and harder to name. The particular flatness of seeing someone you'd spent years trying to understand and realizing, from the outside, exactly who they were. She handed the phone back. "Okay," she said. "Okay." Maya stared. "That's it. That's it. He's allowed to have someone. I have someone." The thought of William moved through her like warmth. Everyone is allowed to move on. You are remarkably evolved. I am remarkably busy. Close the door on your way out. She went back to the lease renewal. She was fine. She was genuinely fine, which was different from the performing fine she'd spent 2 years practicing. She did not tell William that evening when he came down to the bar and they sat together in the closing quiet of grounds. She did not tell him because it wasn't important, because it didn't change anything, because the past was the past and the present was William Dean's voice reading the back of her new library book with genuine interest while she finished her closing tallies. She would wish, later, that she had told him then. Not because the information would have changed anything, but because what came next would have been less of a shock. The city was small in the way all cities were, when the right people were looking for each other. 2 weeks later, Lena Zimmerman walked into the parlor. She came in for a co-working day, her own space was being repainted, and a client she was meeting had suggested the parlor specifically. She walked in at 9:15, past the welcome desk, into the common area, and saw William Dean walking down the stairs from the second floor with a coffee mug in his hand. They both stopped. The common area was populated 5 or 6 people at their stations, the ambient sounds of a working morning, Maya at the welcome desk pretending to be looking at her screen. "Will," Lena said. Lena. A pause of its own particular geology. 8 years of shared space compressed into 10 seconds of a co-working common area. "You're here," she said. "I'm working here. I'm a tenant. She looked around. Took in the space. The warmth of it, the care in it. "I'm meeting a client here today." Then he looked briefly at the stairs. "At the bar. Then let me at least get you a coffee. Let me introduce you to the owner." He was doing the right thing. He knew it was the right thing as he said it, and he was also aware of the very specific, crystalline quality of the moment and what it was going to require. Rachel was behind the bar. She saw them coming. She saw William and she saw the woman beside him, and she was Rachel Hendrix, who had built a business on reading spaces and people accurately, and she read this in approximately 3 seconds. "Rachel," William said, and his voice was steady, which she was grateful for. "This is Lena Zimmerman. She's here for a client meeting. Lena, Rachel Hendrix. She owns the parlor." Lena extended her hand across the bar. "This is an extraordinary space." Genuinely. And she meant it. Rachel could hear it. Not performance. Real. Thank you. Rachel shook it. Held it for precisely the right amount of time. What can I get you? Lena looked at her with the particular sharpness of a woman who was also very good at reading rooms, and Rachel felt the assessment land, saw Lena taken the way William stood near her, the ease of it. The specific gravity between them that two people couldn't quite turn off even in moments like this. Lena ordered a lavender oat milk latte. Rachel made it. The two women looked at each other over the bar with the complicated, clear-eyed recognition of people who were, in the geometry of this situation, on opposite sides of a significant line, and who were both adult enough to know that lines did not have to be battles. Enjoy your meeting, Rachel said. Thank you. Lena took her latte. Moved away. William stayed at the bar for a moment. Rachel looked at him. I didn't know she would be here, he said. I know you didn't. Are you? I'm fine, William. She put her hand briefly on his. 1 second. Go to work. We'll talk tonight. He nodded. Went. Maya appeared at Rachel's elbow 7 seconds later. That, Maya said, was the most tension I have ever witnessed conducted at bar height. Make the 9 o'clock pour-overs, Rachel said. On it. You okay? Rachel thought about William's face when he'd said she was here. The transparency of it, no hiding, no managing, just the plain honest expression of a man in a complicated moment being as straightforward as he could. Yes, she said. I actually am. What she didn't know yet, what neither she nor William knew, was that Lena, walking to the second-floor conference room with her lavender latte, had just texted David Johnson, "You're not going to believe where I am." And David Johnson, who had not metabolized the building, who had named his jealousy concern and his obsession interest, had gone very still and very cold and very particular in his reply. Tell me everything. Chapter 12, The First Warning. It started small, as these things always did. A review appeared on the Parlor's Google listing, 3 stars, tepid language, nothing specific, the kind of thing that could have been written by anyone. Rachel flagged it to her management software and moved on. She received dozens of reviews. Occasional bad ones were simply the cost of operating publicly. 2 days later, a second appeared. Different account, similar vagueness. The atmosphere felt off, the coffee was inconsistent, the owner was difficult to reach. Rachel was not difficult to reach. Her contact information was on every surface of the building. Maya flagged it. These feel written. A lot of bad reviews feel written. These feel written by someone who's never been here. I know. Rachel looked at them again. Nothing she could prove. Nothing actionable. She responded professionally to each one and did not dwell on them. The third thing was a car. She noticed it on a Tuesday evening as she was locking the front entrance, a dark SUV parked across the street that had been there Monday evening too. She might not have registered it except that when she came out at 7:45, the engine was running and the driver's side window was down and she felt, walking to her car, the specific and uncomfortable sensation of being watched. She did not recognize the car. She walked to her own vehicle without looking back, drove home, and sat in her kitchen for a long moment before she called William. Tell me, he said. She told him. Not with alarm, matter-of-factly, the way she'd told him about the leak and the contractor. As information. As something she was noting. There was a pause. Has anything else felt off? He asked carefully. The reviews. Yes. And anything else? She thought about it. A phone call 2 days ago to the front desk. No one on the line. Maya thought it was a pocket dial. Another pause. Longer. Rachel. What do you know? She asked. Nothing confirmed. He stopped. Started again. Lena called me the day after she came to the space. She told me she was seeing someone. She wanted me to know before he paused. She said she was worried. About what? About him. She said he'd been asking a lot of questions about the parlor. About you. She said it felt obsessive in a way she didn't understand yet. Rachel sat with this. Felt the pieces organize themselves in the clear, direct way her mind organized things when it was processing something that required honesty. David, she said. I think so. Yes. She breathed. He doesn't own me. He never did. He just thought he did, and he's angry that I proved him wrong by building something he told me I couldn't build. I know. This is about the building, not about me. It's about his ego and the fact that I exist successfully without him. Yes. Which is true and also doesn't make it safe. She heard the care in that. The distinction he was making between understanding a thing and accepting it. I'll call the property attorney in the morning, she said. Document what I have. Get eyes on it formally. I'm coming over tonight. William. I'm not there to fix anything. I'm there because you shouldn't be alone with this tonight and because I want to be where you are. A pause. Is that okay? She thought about the running engine and the watching dark window. Thought about the years she'd spent being told her instincts were overreactions. Her instincts were not overreactions. Yes, she said. Come over. Part 4. Building something real while something else burns. Chapter 13. What David and Lena became. They were, in the beginning, very good for each other in the way that two specific kinds of damage could briefly feel like healing when they fit together just right. David gave Lena the certainty she'd craved, the man who chose rather than drifted, who showed up with restaurants already booked and opinions already formed. Lena gave David the audience he needed, someone who found his energy impressive rather than exhausting, who had not yet learned to read the difference between confidence and control. They were also, in the privacy of their arrangement, very good in other ways. The chemistry between them was real and fast and informed by a shared tendency toward intensity. David was a man who brought his need for dominance into everything, including bed, and Lena had spent 8 years with someone who was more attuned than assertive, and the heat of David's particular appetite was, initially, like being handed something she hadn't known she was hungry for. They fell into each other with the fast, consuming heat of two people who had each, for different reasons, been deprived of something they craved. For a time, it was enough. The problem was David Johnson's relationship with narrative. He needed to be the most important person in every story he inhabited. And when he learned, through Lena's increasingly careful reporting, through his own digital investigation, through the reviewed pages of the Parlor's expanding press, that William Dean, a man who had been with Lena for 8 years, was now with Rachel Hendrix, his ex-wife, in her building, in the life she'd built without him, the narrative calculus broke. This was not acceptable. This was, in the story David told himself, a violation of the natural order. Rachel was supposed to be a cautionary tale about ambition that had sacrificed relationship. She was not supposed to be thriving. She was not supposed to be loved. He began slowly, rationally. The reviews were careful. The car was careful. He was always careful at first. He learned carefulness from Rachel, who had never let him make her lose her footing in a way anyone else could see. But Lena was in the car with him. That was the part that changed everything. Lena had been angry too, the particular anger of someone who had moved on cleanly and then learned that the person they'd left had also moved on cleanly, and somehow this felt, irrationally and undeniably, like a competition she had not been told she was in. She'd ended things with William. She had no right to the anger. She knew she had no right to it. She felt it anyway. They're together, she told David one night, lying in his bed, working herself through the feeling. Like, actually together. Maya, I have a mutual friend who knows the woman who works at the bar, she said he stays over. That he closes up the coffee shop with her. David's jaw had tightened in the particular way she would later recognize as the first sign of something she should have left. Is that right, he said. David. She gets to have everything, he said. Not loudly. Quietly. That was the thing about David, he was quietest when he was most dangerous. My marriage. My city. The building I told her she couldn't run. And now him. He's my ex, not your. He's a man in my ex-wife's space. That's all I need him to be. She should have said something then. She would think about this moment later, lying on a cot in a place that smelled of antiseptic and institutional cleaning products, and understand exactly what she should have said. She didn't say it. She was angry, and the anger made her feel powerful, and shared anger was its own intimacy. What do you want to do? She asked. He told her. The part of her that was rational, the part that had its own apartment and its own client list and its own carefully constructed life, said, this is too far. The part of her that was angry said, just this once. She chose the angry part. It would be the most consequential choice she ever made, and it would not feel like a choice at all. It would feel like momentum, like the next natural step in a sequence that had been building since the gallery, since the open car window, since the text she'd sent David from the Parlor's second floor. This was how ordinary people ended up doing extraordinary harm. Not through villainy. Through momentum. Through the slow, seductive logic of a shared grievance carried too far. What they did escalated with the particular, ugly acceleration of things that begin small. The reviews became coordinated, a network of accounts, some purchased, that appeared on every platform the Parlor held a presence. The car became 2 cars taking shifts. David had resources, and he deployed them without conscience, the way a man did when he had metabolized his own cruelty as righteousness. He had a copy of the building's original permit records, legally obtained, publicly available, irrelevant to anything, and he sent copies to 3 city council members with a letter implying code violations that did not exist. It created 2 weeks of administrative headache for Rachel, a meeting with a city inspector who found nothing wrong, and a legal bill she hadn't budgeted for. He stood outside the Parlor at closing one Tuesday, and when Rachel came out, he was there. Across the street. Just standing. Looking. She stood on the steps and looked back. She did not flinch. She would not give him the flinch. She went inside, locked the door, called William, and called her attorney. The attorney's name was Cecile Okafor, and she had been Rachel's lawyer since the divorce, and she did not panic and she did not minimize. We document everything, she said. Every plate number, every review, every incident. We build the case with patience, because men like this always overextend. They always do too much. William, sitting beside Rachel at the bar while she was on the phone, said nothing. But his jaw was set and his eyes were level, and she felt in him the particular quality of a man who had decided something. Don't, she said, after she'd hung up. He looked at her. Whatever you're considering doing. Don't. He wants a reaction. He wants to be big enough to change the way I live. I will not give him that. Rachel. I mean it, William. The strongest thing we can do right now is keep living. Keep building. Keep being exactly what we are. She held his gaze. He's afraid of what I built without him. I need to keep building. He breathed. You are remarkably strong. I am remarkably strategic. There's a difference. He took her hand. Both, he said. You are both. Chapter 14. The night it broke open. The breaking came on a Friday, 8 weeks after Lena had walked into the parlor. It had been building in the way water and old pipes built, pressure accumulating in a system not designed to hold it, until something finally gave. What gave was a plate glass window on the ground floor of the parlor, at 2:17 in the morning, shattered by something thrown from a passing car. Rachel's security system had cameras. Cecile Okafor had been waiting for them to overextend. The footage was clear. The car was identifiable. Lena's face was visible in the passenger window, illuminated for 3 clear seconds by a streetlight, her expression carrying the specific quality of a person who has just realized she has gone too far and cannot take it back. Rachel sat in the police precinct at 3:30 in the morning with William on one side and Cecile on the other, and she was calm in the way that deep water was calm, not still, but moving at a depth no surface disturbance could reach. She gave her statement. She handed over the documentation, weeks of it, meticulous, everything Cecile had told her to keep. She answered every question precisely and without exaggeration and let the record speak. David Johnson was arrested at 6 a.m. Lena Zimmerman, who had wept in the car before the police arrived, who had called David's name and gotten no answer because he had already begun calculating how to make her the primary, was arrested at 6:40. Cecile handled the civil components with the efficient, comprehensive grace of a woman who had prepared for this. The restraining orders. The lawsuit. The management of the press inquiry that followed when the incident made local news, a story that the parlor was not the subject of, but the wronged party in, which was a distinction Cecile understood and deployed with precision. William drove Rachel home at 7:30 in the morning. She had been awake all night. She held a paper cup of precinct coffee she hadn't drunk and looked out the passenger window at the city going about its early morning without knowing what had happened. You're quiet, he said. I'm processing. Take your time. She turned to look at him. His profile in the morning light. The particular steadiness of him that she had come to know as reliably as her own heartbeat. I built something, she said. He tried to break it. He failed. Yes. And I need to go back in there today and open the shop and let my members know the space is safe and keep building. Because that's what I do. I know. And I need you to be there. He reached over and took her hand. Where else would I be? She looked at his hand holding hers. The particular shape of it. The warmth. I love you, she said. She said it the way she made coffee, directly, without preamble, because the thing was ready and hesitation didn't serve it. He slowed at a light. Turned to look at her fully. Rachel Hendrix, he said, and his voice had that quality, the careful, weight-bearing quality of a man saying the truest thing he had. I have been in love with you since the morning you brought me a cortado in both hands and wouldn't admit you'd brought it yourself. She started to laugh. The laugh broke something open, not painfully. Cleanly. The way a window opened to let air in. That was purely professional, she said. It was absolutely not. It was me doing my job. You were doing your job and you were falling for me, and both things were true. She was still laughing when they reached her street. The morning was gold and ordinary and full of the sounds of a city that was very much alive and not interested in what had tried to diminish it. She was very much alive too. Part 5. What stays? Chapter 15. The building in winter. 3 months later, the parlor got a feature. Not the first. There had been features before, the local magazine pieces, the listicle inclusions, the occasional Instagram grid repost from someone with real reach. But this was different. A full-length profile in a national publication on Black entrepreneurship, centered on Rachel, on the building, on what she'd made and why she'd made it and what it meant in the landscape of her city and her industry. The writer had spent 3 days at the parlor, had interviewed Maya and 3 members and the podcast studio's most prolific creator. Had photographed Rachel at the bar at her desk, standing in the original brick alcove on the 3rd floor with her arms crossed and her expression carrying the particular combination of pride and ease that came from a person in their right place. The headline, which Rachel had not been allowed to approve, was, "She built it anyway." She read it at the bar on the morning it published, at 5:30, before anyone else was in the building. She read it twice. The second time, she cried, not the 45-minute crying of the opening day, but something shorter and deeper, a release with a specific shape. She was still drying her eyes when William came in at 6:15, early even for him, with a brown bag from the bakery 2 blocks over. He took one look at her and crossed to the bar and put both arms around her from behind and held her. "I read it this morning," he said. "Good writing," she said. Into his forearm. "Remarkable subject." He pressed his mouth to the top of her head. She built it anyway. "I'm going to cry again." "Then cry. I've got you." She did. Briefly. Against his arm, in the bar of her building, at 6 in the morning, before the city was quite awake. And then she breathed and straightened and put her hand over his where it rested on her shoulder. "I want to make you a proper breakfast," she said. "I brought pastries. You brought sugar. I want to make you eggs. Then make me eggs." He kissed the side of her face. "I'll make the coffee." "You can't make the coffee in my coffee shop." "I can't make the coffee at your standard, you mean?" "That's what I said." He laughed. She went to make eggs. He set the bar with the particular neatness of a man who had learned her systems and observed them with genuine respect. They ate in the quiet early morning of grounds, before the first members arrived, before the city fully committed to the day. The pastries were excellent. The eggs were hers, exactly right. The article was on Rachel's phone screen between them on the bar, and at one point William picked it up and read a paragraph aloud, the one in the middle where she talked about her mother, about the advice she'd gotten on the morning of the lease, about the specific courage of betting everything on yourself, and his voice when he read it had a quality she recognized. It was the voice of a man who loved what he was reading, who loved who it was about. She looked at him across the bar. The morning light was doing the particular generous thing it did in this room at this hour. He was reading her story in her voice and finding it remarkable, and she was aware, with a fullness that took up all available space in her chest, of the specific, irreplaceable quality of being known. Not seen. Known. The difference was the whole world. David's trial was set for April. Lena, who had retained her own attorney and entered into a cooperation agreement, would testify. The charges were serious: vandalism, harassment, criminal stalking, and Cecile was confident in the outcome. Rachel had stopped following the case progress closely. She checked in monthly with Cecile, provided what was needed, and otherwise removed it from the center of her attention. She had not built the parlor to make space for David's damage. She would not let him take up more real estate in her mind than he deserved. He deserved none. He received the minimum required to ensure justice was done, and then she turned her attention back to the building and the bar and the man who closed up with her on Tuesday evenings and brought her tea on mornings when she'd been at her desk since 4. Chapter 16. The language they built. They had built, over months, a language between them. It had started as the language of the bar, professional and cordial, with its own small warmth. It had become the language of the table at the Ethiopian restaurant, deep and ranging and hungry for truth. It had become the language of her kitchen on Sunday mornings, shorthand and comfortable, punctuated by the particular silences that meant everything was fine because everything was fine. And it had become, most privately and most richly, the language of her room. They had learned each other with the patience of people who understood that learning a person was not a finite project, but an ongoing one. He had kept every promise made on the second night. She kept her voice. He held everything carefully. The conversation between them in that room was as honest as every other conversation they had, which meant it was very honest indeed. Each layer they found unlocked another. This was the thing she had not anticipated, the correlation between the trust built in bed and the trust built everywhere else. Every new vulnerability offered and held carefully in the dark seemed to expand what was possible in the light. Every time he proved he could be trusted with one true thing, she found another true thing she'd been holding. "You're different," Maya told her one afternoon, with characteristic directness. "Different how?" "You hold your shoulders differently. Lower. Like you're not waiting for something to drop." Rachel thought about this. "I've always held them low." "You've always held them like you made yourself hold them low. Now they're just low." Maya tilted her head. "He does that. William. He makes the room feel safe enough for things to actually relax." She didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about a specific night 2 weeks prior, when she'd woken from a bad dream, not David adjacent, but some older anxiety, formless and pressing, and found William already awake, or perhaps woken by her restlessness, and he'd simply said, "Tell me where you are," and she'd told him, and he'd held her until the dream's residue settled, and then they'd talked about something entirely unrelated, a documentary he'd seen, a book she was reading, until the 4 a.m. became 5 and the anxiety had nothing left to stand on. "He makes it feel like I don't have to hold things by myself," she said finally. "Yes," Maya said. "That's the one." He told her he loved her again on a Thursday. The first declaration had been in the car, half laughing, the morning after the window. This one was different. They were in her office, the small, personal one, the room she'd never let people into that he now entered freely. He was reading something on his laptop while she worked through a zoning variance application that was giving her trouble, and the room had the particular companionable quality of two people working alongside each other in comfortable proximity. He looked up at some point and found her already looking at him, not watching him, just looking, the way you looked at something you were glad was there. "I love you," he said, with the same quiet certainty as everything he said. As a plain, settled fact. "I know," she said, with the same. "I'm going to keep saying it." "Good." He went back to his laptop. She went back to the variance application. The room held them both. It was the most intimate moment they had ever shared. Epilogue, the space she made. A year after William Dean walked off the elevator with a leather bag and a particular quality of attention, Rachel Hendrix made a decision. She converted the third-floor storage room into a wellness space. She'd been planning it since before he arrived. Small meditation room, a massage chair, a quiet corner for members who needed to step away from the noise of productivity and be still for a moment. It was the last unfinished piece of the vision she'd walked into this building with. It was finished in November, on a cold Saturday, and she stood in the completed room the same way she'd stood in the center of the gutted building 4 years earlier, alone at first, in the particular silence of something real. Then William was behind her. She hadn't heard him come in. He put his hands on her shoulders and looked at the room over the top of her head. "This is the last piece," she said. "The last piece of the original vision." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, I've been thinking about what comes next for me here." She turned to face him. His expression was the open, deliberate one he wore when he was saying something he'd considered carefully. "My work," he said, "has been project-based for 5 years. Go somewhere, fix something, move on. I've been thinking about what it would look like to stop moving on." A pause. "I've been thinking about what it would look like to have a home base. A real one. In this city?" "In this city." He held her gaze. "Near you. Near this building. Near the 8 a.m. cortado that I now cannot imagine a morning without." Something moved across his expression, warm and genuine and a little brave. "I'm not asking you to move faster than you want to move. I'm telling you what I want so you can factor it in. So you know where I am." She thought about the word. Home. She had built a home in this building. She had built a home in herself, which had taken longer and cost more, and was worth more than everything else. And now here was a man telling her that his sense of home had oriented around the neighborhood of her life, and asking for nothing in return except that she know it. "I want you here," she said. "I know. I want," she stopped. Found the fuller words. "I want to keep building. But I want to build with you. I want the mornings and the rooftop and the closing up and the office and all of it. I want to know that what we're building isn't temporary." "It is not temporary," he said. "It is the least temporary thing I have ever been part of." She took his face in her hands the way she had the first time on the roof, the same gesture, the same deliberate claiming of the moment. "Then stay," she said. "I'm staying," he said. The room was warm and finished and full of the particular quality of something begun. Below them, the parlor breathed, the bar and the desks and the conference rooms and the podcast studio, all the spaces she'd imagined and made real, all the things that had existed in her mind before they existed in the world. She had built all of it. She had learned, finally, to build in the direction of the things that were also building toward her. This was what came next. This was home. The end. When Courtesy Turns to Courtship. A Hood Eloquence original. Where the streets meet the literature.